To be honest with you, I got a bit weary of what I call the back end, the planning, the organisation, following up, dealing with people's dietary requirements, making sure they're all paid, all that kind of stuff. The dinners themselves were great, always sold out, lots of fun, interesting people on every occasion. But I must be honest with you, the other thing which actually was very much to my advantage was it gave me no excuse whatever not to finish my book. Because I started writing the book, you see, before COVID. I started writing it, and obviously I hadn't written it as in I sat down and started on page one. It was really an accumulation of many stories. Anyways, I just pieced together in a slightly random fashion. COVID came along, everything was turned upside down in my life. Actually, the least of my concerns was COVID, because I didn't get. One probably a few people who didn't get it, but a lot of other things happened which were very difficult and stressful, and I didn't have quick, simple solutions. Anyway, the book got pushed back, not during the dinners. I haven't done one since December 22, enabled me to focus on the book in particular, and I was approached by other publishers, actually in my case in the US, and I signed a deal with them last January. And the book came out about a month ago, but it was really cooking for quite some time, because many of the things I wrote about were in my head anyway. The challenge in a way for me was the fact that there were many stories which I'd never actually written down. And of course, when you're sharing them in front of an audience, you do have the benefit of tone of voice, body language, all kinds of nuances which you have to translate in a slightly different way onto the page. It's not always quite so simple. Anyway, be that as it may, what I would say to you is, yes, you're right. I completely agree that the digital world has consumed people to a point where actually they're very much scared of everyday life. But what I've also learned is if you give people a chance, if you give them permission to be vulnerable, suddenly all bets are off. And to give you an idea about the scope of the attendees, the age range from youngest to oldest out offline was 70 years.
Wow.
The youngest person who ever came was 16. The oldest was 86. I think I mentioned actually him in my book. He was a very interesting guy. So I was hosting a dinner on behalf of a corporate client. And one friend of mine who was coming said, by the way, can I bring someone? I said, of course. Instinctively, my first question was, well, what's her name? What's the story? I was like bearing on the table plan. It's like a pregnant pause. And he says, no, what do you think? I said, what is it? He said, can I bring my dad? I said, your dad? I said, how old's your dad? He said, my dad's 86. He's as bright as a button. I think he'd love it. His father was great. I said, absolutely, bring him with. His father had won a silver medal in swimming at the 1958 Commonwealth Games. He had then become a very successful operatic tenor. And after that, he became one of the very first agents in the world of sport and music management. A really interesting guy who, fascinating. I could spend all day talking about what he did and who we met and so forth.
Yeah.
But to give you a contrast, a 16-year-old, I had a lot of young people come to offline, but 16 was actually particularly young. Her mother is a friend of mine. Her mother actually is a perfumier. She creates fragrances.
Okay.
And I'd met her for a coffee one day. This was actually post-COVID, and her daughter came in to meet us as well. We were chatting about the dinners. She expressed interest. I said, come with pleasure. But I said, you come on one condition only. You understand this at the outset. I'll tell you this in front of your mother. If you come, you will not be sitting at the same table as your mother. You'll be on your own. Obviously, I'll put you with good people, sympathetic for a 16-year-old, but you will learn how to navigate some of the challenges of everyday life. People you've not met before, who are older than you, who look different to you, got a strange accent, but that's a good thing. Her mother was in the room somewhere else, so in a way it wasn't as though somehow she was thrown to the wolves, but it's just interesting that the contrast in people in terms of age, background, history, heritage, education, aspiration, everything. I didn't care. But what I would say to you, which is quite interesting in a slightly different context, there are a great many people who struggle with the idea that somehow there is life beyond their phone. Always remember one particular instance, which I will share with you and your audience, because it was quite instructive in its own way. So I was approached by a woman a number of years ago now who read an article about me in the newspaper. She said, I'm running a very successful outsourcing company, probably turning over then 10 million or so, not insignificant. I know my business very well. We're doing fine. I've got a senior board, business is good. But she said, I feel a bit confined by it. I need to stretch myself. I'd love to come to one of your dinners. I just feel it's something I need. I also knew she was very diffident, very awkward, very unsure of herself. She said to me, when I first came to an offline dinner, I was scared. I was really scared. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know what was expected of me. What would they think of me? Was my conversation interesting? Was my appearance like? Was I have to stand up and talk? Did they understand my accent? A million different things, most of which really were of no great consequence, but collectively cause people not to do something. If you are consumed with the idea that somehow everybody in the room has got nothing better to do than wonder about the state of your hair or what shoes you're wearing, you are much mistaken. Nobody cares about that kind of thing at all. The episcopus, but that is you. Anyway, I put her on a good table, people who were very interesting, sympathetic. Halfway through the evening, I saw her the other end of the room, very animated conversation with a couple of women. They had another bottle of wine there, having a great time. I reminded her, I said, so what about all those fears and those inhibitions? She said, halfway through the evening, I suddenly realized I forgot to be scared. I forgot. I was having a good time. All my fears were slipped away. Well, there was a very graphic example. There were many people who fell into that category. People who were very awkward, people they didn't know, who didn't look or sound like them, or who even judge them, or not find their sense of humor very entertaining. Yeah, maybe, but that's life. And I think the problem with technology is that people almost try to create a perfect life where somehow everything falls into place at just the right time, where you get the kudos, you get the support, you get the appreciation, the love, whatever it may be. And life's not really like that. I think what's important is that you accept that there are limitations to everything. And technology, particularly digital media, is not some solution. It's not as though somehow 30 or 40 years ago, our lives were of no quality because we had no devices. Of course not. People actually got on very well. And the difficult thing is, unfortunately, in the modern age, people are far more concerned with what they go wrong than they go right. And I see it again and again, whether at dinners or just in public life generally. It's not changed a great deal. Part of the challenge you have is, unfortunately, although there's a great deal of emphasis upon children using phones with far too great a level of frequency, the real problem is actually their parents. Their parents have made phone usage an essential component of their day. If you simply say, okay, I'm looking at my phone twice a day, in the bathroom, when I go to bed, great. But people do it all the time. Every time the thing pings, or they get a photo or a message, they feel compelled for some strange reason to respond, as if they've got nothing more important to do. And that, to my mind, is a big problem.
This was a clip from the Be Aware But Don't Care podcast. Watch the full episode or watch another clip